Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. So this is the video on .NET 7 Web API using Vue.js as a client application with composition API implementation and SQL database as a DB. We are going to implement a sample CRUD example. So this is a small diagrammatic representation of how single page application works. Okay, so in a single page application, we should contain two applications. One is normal JavaScript framework based application like Angular, React, or Vue.js, and another thing is any server side application, that is API. Okay, so here API depends upon the database for getting the data. Okay, and client application, nothing but a JavaScript application or Vue.js application, depends upon API to display the data to the client. Okay, so whenever user request, first Vue.js application gets downloaded onto the user browser. Okay, JS files downloads and application gets rendered. So in that application, there will be a HTTP calls, nothing but our API calls. So Java Vue.js application will invoke the API call, and that API call internally communicates with the database and fetches the data from the database and return that response to the Vue.js application. Then that response gets rendered onto the UI. Okay, so that is the flow of single page application using API. Okay, so first let's try to set up the database. Okay, so for this demo we are using Microsoft SQL database. Okay, search like SQL Server download and click on the top link, and we are redirected back to this page, and you can see here download option. Okay, so choose for developer download setup file. Okay, once download it and install the SQL Server file. Okay, so this will provide only server SQL server, database server in our system. Okay, so to interact with the SQL Server, we need to have a nice IDE, integrated development environment. Okay, so for that Microsoft providing SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, which is a nice IDE for communicating with the SQL Server. Okay, okay, such like SQL Server Management Studio download. Okay, and click on the top link. So in short term, we can call it as SSMS, which is a SQL Server Management Studio, which is a rich IDE for interacting with the SQL Server database. And here you can see the download option or the download setup link here. Once you click on the link, the setup file gets downloaded and try to install it. Okay. Since I already installed SQL Server and SSMS, so once the SSMS is installed, you can see like this. Okay, window. So here I am giving my server name. This is my local server name. Okay, and I am going to use the Windows authentication, nothing but my credentials authentication. Okay, click on the connect. Okay, here you can see set of options. In that you can see databases. So here in this database options, we have to add our database. So inside of the database, we can contain tables. Okay, okay, and to create the database, this is the SQL command for creating the database. Create space database and space specify your database name. Here I specified my database name like my old DB. Okay, so just select this command and click on this execute so that database gets created. Once the database created, we have to create the table. Okay, so here is the SQL command for creating the table. So for this demo, I want to display some beautiful beaches, okay, around the world. So I named my table like beach. So here the command is like create table and name of your table, okay. And my table, I am I would like to have columns like ID, okay, which is a primary key. Okay, primary key means unique key, okay. So it will be gets auto incremented. I'm using identity 1 comma 1, that means auto increment by 1 whenever new record is inserted into the database, okay. And it should be not nullable column, and name of the beach and a place and image URL. These are my other columns, and these are all varchar. That means those columns will contain string value. And here I have specified my primary key constraint. Okay. So this whole thing makes the query for creating the table. Okay. So for before executing this table, make sure to select the desired database you want to add your table. Okay, here I want to add it to my old DB and select this query and execute it. That's it. Table gets executed. Okay, since I have already ran those commands, so I am directly showing my created database. And in here you can see an option like tables. If you expand it, you can see all your tables that are related to this particular database. Okay, and if I select, you can see currently there is no data in my table, so it is empty. You can see the results, table results here. Okay, so that's all about the table structure for our demo. Next, we are going to create the Vue.js application. So in this demo, we are going to create Vue.js application. So let's understand what is Vue.js. Okay, then we are going to create the sample project. So Vue.js is a JavaScript framework for creating single page application. Okay, Vue applications built by components. Components are smallest unit of application which comprises script, template and style. Eventually, multiple components combined together forms the Vue application. Okay, so here you can see the diagrammatic representation of the component. So component consists of a script tag where we are going to write our Vue code. Okay, and template element where we are going to add our HTML content, and style. Style is nothing but CSS we are going to add for the particular component. So these combinedly three elements we can create the Vue component. So components are smallest unit of our applications. Okay, they combinedly made entire application. Okay, so Vue 3.0 composition API. Generally, Vue can support two varieties of development. One is optional API, another one is latest one composition API. So in this demo, we are going to use the composition API because it is getting more and more recommended way of writing the Vue application. Okay. So what is composition API? Vue.js application can be developed with options API or composition API. So options is the old way of writing the Vue.js. Okay, still it supports, but most recommended is the composition API, and it supports. We can write both options API and composition API combinedly in our application if you want. Okay, so this option for to migrate from the options API to composition API, you can use both combination. Okay, so that you can slowly migrate to composition API entirely for the existing projects. Okay, so using composition API, we can import functions instead of declaring options. Okay, so basically composition API is mainly calling directly functions. Okay, the main advantage is using the composition API is our code will be very easy to understand and it will very maintainable. Okay, so composition API also we can write in two different techniques. Okay, you can see the script tag, and here you can see some sample in the first approach. If you saw the first approach, you can see the setup method, right? So whatever logic we have to write, we should be added into this setup. This is the default method for the composition API. And whatever method or variable we declare inside of the setup method, those must be written. Okay, then only those properties or functions can be accessed in the HTML. If you see here, here we declared a variable like state and function like incremented. And finally here we are returning them, because if you want to use them in our HTML, we should return them. So this is one technique to write the composition API. If you see the right hand side, second approach, there is no setup method. Okay, the setup method will be added as a one of the attribute to the script tag. Okay, so this is another way of writing the composition API. Okay, both are same, but writing the code will be the different. And here you can see you can declare functions and variables just like normal JavaScript code, right? So this is second technique. So we are going to use mostly second technique only. So let's jump to create our Vue.js application first. To create the Vue.js application, first we should have Node.js server in our local machine. So search like Node.js download, okay? And if you click on the top link, based on your operating system, the links will be available here. So make sure to download them and install them. This is the first basic step we have to do, okay? And here you can see vuejs.org. This is the official website of the Vue.js. And if you go to the documentation guide, okay, here there will be a command for quick start. If you go to the quick start, here you can see npm init view at the rate latest. So this is the command that's going to create a Vue.js template project for us. Okay, so copy this, and I have created one a folder like .NET 7 and Vue 3. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create both .NET and Vue.js application inside of this project. Okay. So what I will do here, let's open the command prompt. Okay, and paste the command and run it. Okay, here we are going to provide some input to the this command line interface. Okay, the first thing is name of the project. So let me give the name of the project, Vue 3 CRUD sample. This is my project name. And here it is asking for TypeScript. I am going to use JavaScript only. So I am opting for no. And JSX, no. And view router, yes, I am going to use the view router. So opt for S. Okay. Next, do you want state management? No, for my demo, I am not going to use the state management. So simply opt for no. And any unit test, no. Okay. And any end-to-end testing, no. And ESLint, no. And finally, the project got created. If you see here, the project got created. So let's open the project. So to open the project, I am going to use the IDE for my Vue.js application development, that is Visual Studio Code Editor, which is a very lightweight editor. Okay. Okay, go to the code.visualstudio.com website and you can find the download file for your respective operating system. Okay, download it. Since I have already downloaded it, I am going to open the project inside of the Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, here is our project. Okay, first let's go through the existing files in our Vue.js application. Okay, first thing, let's go for package.json. So this will contain the commands to run our application, build our application, and also the files that are dependent for the development or that are files dependent for the application running. All those things configured in this package.json file. And you can see the index.html file. So here you can see the only file, the single page file we will call it, right? This is the main HTML file, only HTML file in our Vue.js application. So all the content on this HTML page only dynamically renders based on our Vue logic and Vue routing. You can see here div with an ID app, right? So inside of this div, all our Vue.js components gets rendered. Okay. And next thing you can observe, if you go to the src main.js, so this is the entry.js file of our application, and you can see here initializing some create app and view router and mount. If you see here, this is nothing but the id of this div. Okay, so that is the about main.js, which is entry.js. Next, app.view. So this is the entry component. Okay, why it is entry component means, if you go to the main.js, here you can see app, which is the app view component. So we are building the project. This is the entry component of entry view component. Okay, it will contain header. So it will be like a master template page. We can treat it as a master template page here. And here you can see router view. So in this area, page content. So based on the view routing, the content will be dynamically changed. That dynamically changed content will be rendered at this router view. Okay, and I have told you, right, script tag and template and style tag combinedly creates view component. Okay, so this is a entry view component. And nesting views folder, you can see some sample uh, folders, sorry, view files. So these are like page level, like home page and about page. Okay, and next you can see router folder where routing is configured. You can see path, home, about page, and component is loading. So these are all view routing file and components. So if you want to add some sub components, you can add into this folder. And finally, assets folder where we can add logos, images, and all the PNGs. Okay. So the first thing is we have to install the packages. Currently, we don't have any packages. So for that, open the terminal. Okay, in the view, you can see the terminal. Okay, and here enter command like npm install. That going to install all the required packages for building or setup or running our application. Okay, install it. So it's going to take few seconds. Let's wait. Okay, now you can see node modules folder is added. So all these packages are now we just installed with this npm install command. Okay, now what we can do means, if you go to the package.json, here there is a command for running the project. Okay, the command is dev. So to use this command, I have to write it like npm run and the name of the command dev. So what will happen means, internally some localhost server will set up for us. Okay, and that server will host our application and runs our application. Okay, let me run this command, npm run command in the scripts, which is dev, npm run dev. Okay, you can see some local server is running at port number 5173. So let me access this localhost port. See here, this is the default page with the default components we can see. So about home page, see how the content is shifting based on the route. And here you can observe the route also changing. That is because of Vue.js routing. Okay. So now I don't want these default things. So first, as a first step, now I want to set up a basic Bootstrap menu here. Okay. Okay, let me copy this CDN links. Okay. So this is for styles. So what I will do in the index page, in the head closing head tag, I will add this CSS file link. And next I am going to copy the JavaScript link and I will add it after this script tag. Okay, what we can do, uh, in the src, go to assets, and in the main.cs, let's remove all the default things. Okay, And next thing, now we have to go to our app view, and this is the header. I don't want this. Let's remove this. Okay, and I don't want any styles in the inside of this style tag. Let's remove them as well. Okay, and let's remove unwanted code here. Okay, now here I want to add the Bootstrap navbar. So go to Bootstrap website, and if I go to docs, and if I go to navbar component, okay, here is the navbar component. So one of the navbar component, let's try to copy. Okay, let me copy this, add it here. Okay, and let's add some default things. Okay, let me add some navbar heading. Okay, let's close this div, missing div. Okay, and I will name it like beaches to visit. Okay, and let's move this router to inside of the container of the Bootstrap. Okay, okay, now you can see nice Bootstrap menu is added to our website. Okay, this is our initial step for setting the Bootstrap website. Next, we are going to create a .NET application as well. Okay, let's understand what is Web API. Web API is a framework for building HTTP services that can be accessed by any client, like a browser application or a mobile device application or a desktop apps. Okay, in simple terminology, API means application programming interface. Means interface module that contains programming functions that can be requested via HTTP calls for fetching or to save the data at the server. Okay, so some of the key features of API are it supports HTTP verbs like get, post, put, delete. So these represents get means for fetching the data, post means for posting the data means creating the new record, put means for updating the existing record, delete means for deleting the existing record at the server. Okay. By default, API returns two default responses like XML and JSON, and it is absolutely customized to define your own output as well. Okay, something like HTML images also you can return as a response from the API. Okay, so it can be self-hosted on all different kinds of platforms and can be consumed by all different kinds of applications. Okay, that this is the brief overview on Web API. And here is a small diagrammatic representation of Web API. Since already we discussed it, right? Web API fetches the data from the database and it can be served to any kind of application, like it is a desktop, mobile, or tablet, any kind of application. Okay. So let's create a sample .NET 7 application. Okay. Okay. First thing is to develop any .NET application, we need a IDE, integrated development environment. Okay. So the first recommended IDE is Visual Studio. Okay, so Visual Studio, we have a free edition to learn for the developers, that is community edition. You can see here. You can come to this link and you can see the download option. Okay, here it is showing for downloads for Visual Studio 2022 because .NET 7 is supported by VS 2022 only. Lower versions of VS won't support .NET 7. Okay, So the professional and enterprise are paid versions and community is the free version. So this is one option and this is the primary option. Okay, so you can click on the download and this installer will be downloaded. You can run it and it will take some around 1 hour for the installation. Once that is done, you are ready to go for creating the web API application. Since my system has some configuration issues to install the community edition, I am going to use another option that is .NET CLI. Okay, so in this video, I am going to use the .NET CLI and I am going to use the IDE like Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, we already use Visual Studio Code for Vue application creation, right? Same editor I am going to use for .NET also. Okay, but if you have an option to install community, please choose the Visual Studio as the first option. Okay. Okay, such like .NET 7 download, to use the .NET CLI commands, we have to install the .NET 7 SDK explicitly. If you are using Visual Studio, by default, the SDK will be automatically downloaded, but you should have the latest version of Visual Studio 2022. Okay, here you can see the .NET 7 supported Visual Studio versions for Mac and Windows as well, some 17.4. Okay, so you must get the latest to get the .NET 7 by default. Since I want to use the .NET CLA, right? So I have to install the SDK explicitly. For that, we have to navigate to this URL. Okay, and here is the latest .NET 7 SDK. So here you can see installers. Based on your operating system, you can install. If you are a Windows user, you can use x64. Okay, please download it and install it. Okay, since I have already installed .NET 7 SDK into my system, I am not going to do it again. Okay, previously we have created the Vue.js application, right? In the same folder, I am going to create my .NET 7 application as well. Okay, using command prompt. Okay, here is the .NET CLI command for creating the web API application. Okay, this command only works when you install SDK. Previously, I have shown you, right? Then only this CLI gets installed. Okay, so here is the command for installing the web API like .NET space new space template name. My template is web API, right? So web API space -o. -o represents I want to create a output directory. Means one folder. Inside of that folder, I want to create my .NET project. Okay. And here I specified my project like .NET 7 API.CRUD. Okay, let's run it. And here you can see the project got successfully created. You can see the application here. Okay. So let me open my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, here you can observe I have opened my project in Visual Studio Code Editor. And to develop the .NET application in Visual Studio Code Editor, we required one extension, okay, that is C Sharp, which was provided by Microsoft itself. You need to install this extension. That's it. Nothing is required. Okay. Now let's go to the application. And now let's observe the default things in our application. Okay. If you see program.cs is the startup file of our application. Okay. Here you can see the default services that are registered like controller service and endpoint API Explorer, that service for uh, support the minimal API and Swagger service. And you can also observe the after the service registrations, you can see the middlewares. Okay, and you can observe there is a condition to work the Swagger page only for developers development environment, and you can see HTTPS redirection. This middleware helps if the request come as HTTP, it will redirect to HTTPS. And authorization middleware and map controller. This controller will route our navigation to the respective controllers. Okay, so this is the default program.cs file. Okay, so now the main idea is I want to set up a database context. Okay, That means I want to use the NT framework core to communicate with my database. Here is our table, right? Previously we have created. So to communicate with this database from my application, I need a library that is NT framework core. Okay, there are several different libraries to communicate with the database, but one of the first choice is NT framework core. Okay, so using NT framework core, using code first with existing database, we are going to set up the database context. Okay, so to set up the database context, first we have to install the NT framework core required packages. Okay, search like EF core NuGet and click on the top link. Okay, if you are using Visual Studio, you can use this command from the package manager, or you can use the direct UI interface, package manager UI interface, where we can easily install the packages. Since I am using the CLI, right, I am going to use this .NET CLI command. So copy this command. Okay, in the Visual Studio Code, open the terminal. Okay, paste the command and run it. Okay, the package is installed successfully. To confirm it, the package got successfully installed. We can check in the CS project file. Okay, here you can see NT framework core package reference added. And here you can see target framework. I forgot to mention this initially. Here you can see our project is a .NET 7 application. Okay. Next, along with NT framework core, since our database is SQL, right? We have to install one more dependent library of the NT framework core that is related to SQL. Okay, such like EF core, SQL NuGet, and click on the top link. Okay, here is the SQL NT framework core SQL NuGet package. So copy the link, open the terminal, install it, and you can see here both the packages references are added here. That means packages are installed successfully. Okay. So now I can start creating the database context. Actually, what is database context? Database context is nothing but a simple class, C# class, but it will act as a database. Okay. From our code point view, database context will be the database. It will represent the database. Okay. So we can write queries on top of it, and we can fetch the data, or we can save the data to the database. Okay. So this database context usually contains all the tables. So how the database context class tables contains means we have to create classes for each table. For example, here we are dealing with the beach table, right? We are going to have a beach class. That class must be registered in the database context. So from that we can query the database. Okay, that means first let me create a table class, that is a beach class. So what I will do, I'm going to create a folder like data. Okay, inside of the data folder, let me create one more folder like entities. So this entity folder contains all our classes that represent our table. In our case, we will have only one table, right? That is beach table. So let's create the beach table or beach class. Okay. So the class name must be matched with the table name. It is a convention when we use with the database context. Okay, here is our plain C# class. So to make it our table class, all the columns in the table must be registered as a properties in this class. Okay, like this we have to represent all our table columns as a class. And if you observe, I have prefixed the type with question mark that represent that column is a nullable column, means it can accept nullable values. Okay, so I have ready with my table class. Now I have to create the database context class. So now in the database data folder, let me create a database context class. Okay, so by convention, it is good to give the database name to the database context class. Okay, my database is my old, right? I will give like my old DB context. You can give any name, but it is a general convention to give it the database name as a name to the context class name. And here you can see my database context class, which is a plain C# class. Okay. Now to make it our DB context class, it must inherit DB context that comes from Microsoft Entity Framework core library, which we just installed. Okay. Import the namespace. Okay. Now add the constructor. So to this constructor, let's register the DB context options. Okay. And to that options type is nothing but our context type and options, and those options must be passed to our base context. Okay. So that is my DB context class. So I have already mentioned, right? Table classes must be registered as a properties inside of the database context so that we can interact with the respective tables. Okay, to register the table classes, we have to wrap it around DB set. Okay, and here my table class beach. So this property name must match with our table name. Okay, so that's it. That is my database context. Now I have to register my database context into my program.cs file as a service so that it can be injected wherever we want. So while registering, we required SQL connection string. So let's prepare the SQL connection string. Okay. So for my demo, I can use appsetics.development.json for adding the connection string. Okay. Here I will add like connection string. Instead of connection string, I will create a property like my old DB connection. Okay, here you have to add your connection string value. Okay, here is my connection string. Okay, let's decode it, how to prepare it. So connection string is the key value pair string. Okay, so here keys are default keys and values are we have to provide. Okay, so data source, it is a key and its value must be our server name, SQL server name. If you see here, my server name is local DB. Okay, so same value I have provided here. If you see here, initial catalog. Here, initial catalog means database name. If you observe here, master is there. It is not master. It's our name of our database. So what is the name of my database? My old DB. So let me replace it. Okay. So initial catalog means our database. And here you can see a key like integrated security that represents if the value provided as true means we are saying that use Windows authentication means our system authentication as a authentication value. So if you don't want to use authentication value, Windows authentication, then you can use instead of integrated security, you have to add two more keys like username and password. Okay, and connection timeout. And I have specified like 30 seconds. Okay, so this is how we can prepare the connection string. You can add lot of other things where SQL provides where we can use in the connection string, but these are sufficient key value pairs to make a SQL connection. Okay. So I am ready with my SQL connection. Now I can go to program.cs file. Now I have to register here. So to register it, builder.services.add db context and pass our db context name. Okay. And here we have to configure the options. So options dot use SQL server. Okay, that comes from the Microsoft Entity Framework core. So import the namespace, and here we have to pass our SQL connection string. So where is our connection? In the app settings dot development dot JSON. So to get the connection string, my old DB connection value, we can use builder configurations dot get connection string, and here we have to pass the property name, my connection DB. Okay, that's it. We are done with setting the database context. Okay. Next, we are going to implement the read operation. Means we are going to create a endpoint get endpoint, and we are going to bind the API response into our Vue.js application. So in this video, our aim is to create a read operation. Okay. For that, we are going to create a get endpoint in our web API application. Okay. So let's go to the controllers folder and let's create a controller for our demo. Okay, so controller is a simple class and that contains HTTP action method. Each action method gets invoked for respect to HTTP request. Okay, so let's first create the controller. So I will name it like beach controller. Okay, okay, here is our beach controller. So it must inherit the controller base that loads from the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC. Okay, and here we decorated with one attribute like API controller. So this applies some inbuilt API functionalities to this controller. Okay, such like versioning, those things. Okay, and here we are using the attribute routing. So here if you see here, within the square braces, we have added controller. That means route must be the name of the controller name. Okay. So route will be the beach. Okay. If you don't specify this controller with square brackets, then it won't be an expression. It is a normal string. Then the route value will be the simple controller. Okay. So to take the name of the controller name, you have to enclose it with square brackets. Now the route will be the beach. Okay. So as a first step, first let's inject the our DB context into the constructor of our controller. Okay. So private read only context. Okay. Let's import the namespace and assign it here. Okay. Now let's create our action method. So action method is normal function that get executed for the HTTP request. Okay, since we are doing the read operation, right, means I want to fetch all the data from the database. So for that, I am going to create the HTTP get action method. Okay. So to create the action method public, I want to do asynchronous call. So I will use async task and return type will be iAction result. So any kind of API response can be used this generic action result. Okay. And name it like get as a convention. And it should be invoked for HTTP GET request, right? So here I have to specify the HTTP verb like HTTP GET. Okay. Since currently our controller has only one GET endpoint, right? I no need to specify the route explicitly. If we have more than one action method that represents specific HTTP verb, then we must explicitly specify the route. Just like on the controller, how we specified, same way we have to specify the route explicitly. Okay, if we have multiple action methods that represent same HTTP verb. Okay, so since I have currently only one, right, I am not going to add the additional path. Okay, so by default, based on the HTTP GET request, this action method gets executes. So let me fetch the data of all beaches. Okay, dot our beach table dot. I want to fetch all the data, right? So I can use to list async I want to use. I want to call asynchronous call. Okay, for that we have to import the Microsoft Entity Framework core library namespace. Okay, so it's going to fetch all the data from our table, beach table. And finally, I want to return the response success status. So for API, success status is 200. For that, I can use method like OK. To that OK, if I pass beaches, so this data will be written as a response to the client. Okay, that's it. This is our simple action method for fetching all the data from our table. So let's run and check the output. Okay, to run from the CLI, I will use command like .NET watch run. Okay, so upon starting our application, we can see a Swagger page, which is a testing tool for the developers. And here you can see all the APIs are listed here. So we just created beach, right? Get endpoint. So that is here. To test it, you can click on try out and execute it. And let's you observe here, some data is coming as a response. So this data is dummy data. I have already added into the database. So I am able to fetch the data through the API. Okay. So we are done with the action method. Next, we are going to consume this endpoint in our Vue.js application. Okay. So let's go to our Vue.js application. Okay. Now in our Vue.js application, in the SRC, we have views folder, right? So these views folders are nothing but page level folders. So I want to create a folder like features. Okay. Instead of this folder, I want to create a new view component. So that component will act as a my home component, and it's going to display all the collection of items. Okay. So for that, I will name it like, so component name must be starts with capital. Okay. Each list view component name. Okay, and we know that generally the tags a view component contains is script, template, okay, and the styles. Okay, so template element will have our HTML content. So let me add a some data like hello. Okay, so this is my beach list component. Okay, now I want to configure route for this component. So for that, we have to go to the router folder and the index.js. So here there are some default routes where I can remove them. Okay. So what I will do, I will change the component here, home component. Okay. I don't want to use the default home component. Okay. So import the component here on the top. Okay. So let's replace it here, component. Okay. And there is no, I don't want this about component. Let me remove this. So finally, our route.index.js looks like this, and also remove this unused component reference. Okay, now if I run and access my Vue application, I must see this message. Okay, so let me run. So to run Vue.js command is npm run dev. So this is the local host that runs our Vue.js application. Copy it and access on our browser. Here need to specify the extension .vue. Okay, so let's go to our beach list component here. Now we have to consume the API into our Vue.js application. So to consume the API, we have to install one more third-party library, that is Axios, which is the best JS library for consuming the HTTP requests. Okay, so it is very simple to install. Open one more terminal for installing the Axios. So command is npm I Axios. If you want, you can Google it. So it's going to install the Axios in our system. Okay, so it is done. Now what I will do, I have explained, right? I'm going to use the composition way of writing. So to make it this component as composition way of writing instead of optional way, here I am going to decorate this script tag with setup attribute. That's it. Now here I can write simple JavaScript code using the Vue default function. I can create the component. Okay. So the first thing is I want to invoke the API call. So for that, I have already installed the Axios. So we cannot directly write a code for Axios directly here within the script itself, because I want to invoke that API call only when the component is mounted. For that, we have a lifecycle method is like uh, mounted, on mounted in Vue. So first, let's use that method. So on mounted. Okay, it's going to refer from the Vue library. Okay, in this method, I can write the logic that have to work before rendering of the component. Okay, so here I can call my Axios call. So to invoke the API call, I can write like Axios. For that, I have to import the Axios library. Okay, from Axios. So since it is a get request, I have to invoke, right? There is a method like get. Okay. To this method, I have to pass my API endpoint. Okay. So on successful response, once the API response is successful, we have to listen for the response. So now I have to somewhere I have to store that response. I have to bind it to the UI. So one thing is I can create a variable like constant. I will name it like beach collections. It's going to be a collection of data, right? And array. But I cannot use a normal constant like this here, because whenever this data is changed, that must be reflected in our HTML. Okay, we haven't written code for data binding, but whenever this data is changed, if that data is used inside of the HTML, that should be reflected. So in that case, we cannot use normal variable like this. So for that, we can use one of the reactive variable like ref. Okay, that also comes from the Vue, so we must import it. Okay, so inside of this ref, I can initialize the initial data of this variable. So initially we don't have any data, right? I'm going to give the empty array of collection. So once the API call is successful, I can pass the data to this variable now. So for that, I can use each collection equal to response dot data. Okay, so this is my API response. I am assigning to it. Now here I want to render the data. So here I want to loop this collection of data into my HTML. Go to Bootstrap website and go for docs, and I want to display each item in the Bootstrap card. So go for card component. Okay, and in that go to bottom section. Here I want this kind of display. So copy the HTML, paste it inside of this container. Okay, And let me remove the duplicate cards. We just need one card HTML template because we are going to loop our collection. Okay. Okay. To loop it, we can use v hyphen for attribute. Okay. On this column, I want to loop this entire div item. So for that, what I will do, v hyphen for, okay, for looping the any content in the view template. Okay. Since beach collection contains our API response, right? We have to get the information from this variable. Okay, to get the information from this variable, I can use in. So item is a normal template variable. Okay, beach collection is our component variable. In will fetches each item from the beach collection into this variable on every iteration. Okay, and we also have to define the key attribute whenever we loop in Vue.js, that because it will track each individual item. Here we looping, right? To track, we have to add the key attribute. For that, we have to give the unique item. Okay, so what I will do, I am going to pass the ID value. So in the API, I will get ID column, right? So this will be the unique value. So I am going to pass that value to the key. So I can pass it like, since the data will be stored into this variable, right, for each iteration. So I can access like item.id. Okay. And now I want to bind the image URL here. I have image URL right in the API. I want to bind it here. Okay. So for that, what I can do, so to bind for any data to any attribute in the HTML, to make it dynamic binding, the attribute must be prefixed with colon. Okay, so then it will be the dynamic attribute. Okay, so I can call it like item dot, and what is the property name? Image URL. Okay, and here title, I want to display the beach name. So to render inside of any element, okay, we have to use flower brackets. Okay, for data binding. For attributes, we have to use the colon. For inside of the any element, we have to use the flower brackets. Okay, so item dot, I want to bind the name of the beach. Okay, so copy that and add it here. And in this paragraph tag, I want to display the location. Okay, we know, right, for dynamic binding, we have to use the flower brackets inside of the element. So item dot place. Okay, that's it. We are ready with our component. Make sure both the applications are running. Okay, both .NET and Vue.js. And here I have forgot to given the endpoint here in this Axios get method. So let's pass our endpoint. So this is my endpoint URL. So pass it here and save it. Okay. Now let's try to access our Vue application. Okay. So let's open the network call to observe the API call. Okay. And reload it and go to network call, and you can see here course. Why? Because our endpoint portal is 5247 API port number, and our Vue.js application port number is 5173, means different ports. Technically, they are different domains. So in any API application, whenever a client tries to consume it, it will reject it. Okay. So to make our client request accepted by our API, we must enable the CORS. Okay, cross origin issue we are getting, right. So we must enable the CORS so that this CORS error will be resolved. Okay, for that first we have to go to our web API application and go to program.cs file. Let me register the CORS service here. Okay, so let me register here. Register on the top. So builder dot services dot add course. Okay. And we can configure a number of options. Okay. So here in the options, I have to add the policy for my course and I have to give here name. Okay. So this name must be used by the middleware, course middleware. Okay. So I can define the rules for my course. So for now, I will do like I'm going to allow any kind of origin. Okay. Any kind of header and any kind of method. Okay. So these are my course rules. And now this service must be invoked by our middleware. So here on top of this redirection, I can call the course middleware. Okay, use course. And to this course, we have to pass our course policy name. Okay, paste it here. Now let's rerun our application. Something is missing, so semicolon. Okay, rebuild our application. To rebuild, I can use Control R. Okay, save it and Control R. Okay, my API application is successfully running. Now let's go to our Vue application. Now if I reload again and go to network call, see here network call is successful. API is successful. Now there is no course error. And if you observe the preview, response is coming. And let's check whether it is binding or not. Not binded. Okay, here I did a mistake. Why it is not rendering means, if you observe, our beach collection is type of ref, right? So in the HTML, I can directly use the ref variable. But inside of the component, if you want assign data to its variable, it should be assigned to value. Okay, should not directly assign it to the variable name itself. Dot value you have to assign. Now save it and check again. See, my data is rendering nice card display and beach name, location, images are rendering. So that's all about the read operation in .NET 7 and Vue sample application. Next, we are going to implement create operation. Previously, we have implemented read operation, right? Like fetching the data from the server and binding using our Vue.js. Now, let's try to implement the create operation. Means we are going to have a create endpoint as well as we are going to create a add form in our Vue.js application. Okay, so first let's create the create endpoint in our API project. Okay, now let's create one more action method. And we are going to create a new record, right? So I will name it like post, just convention. And to invoke this endpoint for the post request, we must decorate with the HTTP get. Okay, so HTTP post, so that this action method can be invoked only by the post request headers. Okay, and this action method should contain the payload because we have to create a new record, right? So let's define our input payload parameter. Okay, or I can name it like new beach. Okay, and import the beach namespace. So now what I can do, I can use my DB context beach dot. Here you can find a method like add method. So to that add method, we have to pass our payload, nothing but our new each input parameter. Okay, so what it will do means this record will be attached to the DB context. That means the state of the DB context is modified as add. Okay. So whenever the state of the DB context is changed, and immediately if we call save changes method, then whatever the state is updated or changed in the context will be saved against the database after calling this save changes method. Here we are changing the state of the context and calling the async method. Whatever the change is applied to the context will be generated as a query and it will be executed against the database. Since here it is add, right? That means it will generate it as a insert query and executed against our database. Okay. Finally, I can simply return OK, and you can pass same payload in the return response. And in the return response, you can see the beach have parameter, right? Like ID value. So initially it will be 0 because it is new record, right? So once it is updated into the database, automatically the ID will be updated in the context as well. Okay. So confirm whether our record is created or not. In the response, you can see the ID value. If it is not 0, if it contains some value, that means the record is inserted into the database. Okay, that's it. We are done with our endpoint creation. Okay, if you save and check our Swagger page, here you can see new endpoint is created with the post, HTTP post type. Okay. Now we have to consume this endpoint into our Vue.js application. Okay, now let's create new component inside of the beaches folder. Okay, so let me create a new component like add beach. So our goal is to create a form inside of this component. So that form help for creating the new record. Okay, so initial steps, script and template. And since we are using composition API, right, I have to use setup attribute. Okay, now I have a new component. Now let's register the routing for this new component. For that, I can go to the index.js file in my router folder. Here, I can copy this and duplicate. Okay, I can give like name like any name you can give. Okay, and here I have to define the path. So I will define a path like add. Okay. And here we have to map the component. So we created a new component, right? So let's duplicate this import, and my new component is add beach. Okay. So let's map this component for this route. Okay. Now here, let's try to create the add form. Okay. Let me add a container div and also add some margin top. Okay. And next, let me add a form here. So let me add a form here. Okay, and let me give heading like add a new item. Okay, so here let's add some fields. Since we are getting data like beach place, beach name, and images, right? So let's add 3 fields here. So for that, let's go to Bootstrap website. So go to the documentation, docs, and here look for the forms here. Okay, go to overview. Okay, and from here, let me copy this field, one field. I am copying one field from here. Okay, okay, let's do some modifications here. This must be, I need every input type must be a text only. Okay, I don't want this additional div. Label is enough. Okay. So let me duplicate it two more times. Okay. And here let's do some modifications. So this is for beach name. Okay. And let's give appropriate IDs. Text beach name and give for label for. Okay. This is for location. Okay. Text location. Okay. And pass this to ID. Input field ID value. Okay. And now here let me give image URL. Text image URL. Okay, and give it here. Okay, and let's check whether we are able to get this add form in our application or not. Okay, so here is my application, right? So to see that add form, I have to navigate to add. Okay, so here is our form. And I missed the button. Let's add button also here at the bottom. Button like add, and I type give like it is a form, right? Let me give form submit and provide some Bootstrap classes btn and btn primary. Now let's check the output. Yeah, we are getting button as well. Now we have to add some component level logic, right? So inside of the component on form submit, I need to execute a API call. My post API call we have just created, right? We have to invoke this API call on form submit. So for that, let me create a method here. Okay. I will use the arrow function way of method writing. Okay. I will name my method like add a beach. Okay. So here I want to invoke my post API call, right? So Axios, since it is a post, right? If you recall beach list, for get we have get method. Same way for post we will have a post method. Okay. And make sure to import the Axios here. Here it is automatically imported for me. If it is not imported automatically, make sure to import it. And here I can pass same URL, same URL only, right? You can check here, same URL. But request must be post request. Okay, and it will contain this post method should contain the payload. But where is the payload? Payload is our form data. That means we require to create the payload. So for that, we are going to use model binding. Vue.js supports model binding. Okay, so that we can read form data very easily. So for that, what I will do, I will add one variable here like beach. Okay, previously to maintain the state and render that state data into our component HTML, we used ref, right? So here also you can use ref, but each variable we have three form fields, right? So we have to create three variables, three ref variables. Okay, like this. So what I want to say means I have beach name, location, image URL, right? So beach name, location, ref, initial value empty, empty, and image URL, ref, empty. Okay, I have created three. three variables. So these three variables must be mapped to our form so that we can implement the two-way model binding. Okay. So to implement that, we have to use VModel. Okay. To that VModel, we have to pass this variable. Okay. Like this, we have to bind. But instead of creating individual ref variables, okay, this is fine approach only. There is nothing wrong with this approach, okay, but we can do little better. So what we can do means, instead of that, I will create a variable like single variable like new beach. I will use, instead of ref, I will use react to type variable. Okay, so this react to also loads from the Vue.js. Okay, I can use this reactive. So what is the benefit of this reactive means I can define the object like this. Okay. So here I can use my payload property name so that same properties I can bind it to the UI. So these payload properties, I will take it from here. So the whatever the property names you add here, make sure to give the property names of our payload. Here is our payload, right? Just give these names. Okay. The next place. And what is another property? Image URL. I can ignore the ID value here. If you want, you can give because it is always zero, right? So I am ignoring that ID value here. Okay. Now we have to map, right? So remove beach name. I can directly use beach name dot see. Automatically it's showing V model. V model. It is place. Same way for image URL also we have to map model binding. So here it will be image URL. Okay. So whatever data we entered here into this form field, it will be stored into this new beach object, react to variable type object. Okay. So here I can simply pass new beach as my payload. Okay. So on success, okay, once data is posted, my API call is success. I want to navigate back from my add form to my beach list. Okay. I want to navigate from this component to this component. Okay. So to navigate from one component to another component, we can use. So let me declare one more variable. Okay. So one thing here we have to remember, always the react to form variable always use let. Don't use constant. If you use constant, the data won't be updated. Okay. So router, I can use router. If you see, observe this use router comes from the view router package. Okay, now I can use the router variable. So here router dot push. To this push, you can specify the whatever the route path you want to navigate. I want to navigate back to my home page, right? So I can give simply slash that represents my home page. Okay. Okay, now we have to invoke this add beach method on submitting the form. For that, I can use @submit, and I don't want to reload the page. Okay, for that I can use dot prevent. Okay, general nature of submit is it will post the data and it will also reload the page. Here preventing the page reload. And if you observe here dollar hyphen event, so this is a normal just convention. Okay, after that arrow you can call our method. So add beach. Okay, you can remove that dollar event or you can add if you want arrow function, or you can directly give the method name like this. Okay, so that's it. We are done with our uh, add beach form, but we have directly navigated to add, right, add page, but we have to programmatically navigate. That means from home page we have to navigate to our add beach component. So for that, what I have to do, I have to add a button inside of the beach list. Okay, so here let me add a row and let me give margin top some 2 pixels. Here let me add a column where I want the content should be centered. Okay, so I can use MD4. So let me add a button here. Instead of a button, I can use router link and I can display it as a button. Okay. Okay. And for that router link, so this is a Vue router default component for navigation. What it will do means it will render as a anchor tag. Okay, I want to go to add, right, add route. So to the two attribute you have to pass your path. Okay, it will be the add button name, and I want to display it as a button. For that I can apply Bootstrap classes. Okay, okay, that's it. Let's check. So let's go to home page. Okay, now here we can see the add button. If I click on this add button, see, I navigated to my add form. Okay, so let's populate our form with a new item. Okay, here I have added some dummy data to create as a new item. So let me inspect element to check the network call. Okay, and now if I click on add button, I must add the new item to my server, and after successful add, I must redirect back to my home page. So I am clicking on the add button. See, I redirect back to my home page, and here you can see new item is added. This is the new item we just added. If you check the network call, the first call is our post call. See, and request method post. And here you can see the payload we are passing. And in the response, we can see ID value is coming. That means that record is successfully saved. Okay. On redirecting back to my home page, again our get API call invoked, and here you can see my record, and that record is rendered here. So that means we are successfully done with our create operation. Next, we are going to focus on update operation. Previously, we implemented create operation, right? So in this video, our goal is to implement the update operation. That means we are going to create the update endpoint and we are going to create the update form in our Vue.js application. So coming to creating the update endpoint, here we have to create two endpoints. Why two endpoints? First endpoint is a get endpoint, second is a update endpoint. Why get endpoint means we have to fetch the data that we want to update, right? So whenever we click the update form or open the update form, some data must be displayed, right? So to populate that form, we will create a new get by ID endpoint. Okay. So we need two endpoints for update operation. One is get by ID, another thing is normal update endpoint. Okay, first let's create both the endpoints now. Okay, so now first let's create the get endpoint. So public link task action result and get. Now this get endpoint should have a input parameter like ID because I want to filter the particular record that we want to update using the ID value. Okay, so I can use ID here. So it is a get, right? We have to decorate with the HTTP get. Since we have more than one request type of action method, right? Previously we have only one get action method, but we have now two get action methods. API cannot deliver the get request because here there is a ambiguity. Which get point user try to invoke, right? So for that, whenever we have more than one endpoint that represent a particular HTTP verb, then we have to specify the route attribute explicitly. So here I will specify the route. Okay. In this route, I simply specify the ID as a value in the route. So for that, I can give ID. Okay. And this ID in the route must be always the integer. For that, I can add validation like integer. Okay. So this is my route. Now I have to fetch from my DB, right? So what I can do, so where beach by ID, my old DB context beach dot. Here I can use where condition. So where is a link queue method helps us to filter the data. Okay, I am trying to filter the data by ID value. So I want to get only one record with that ID, right? So I can use first or default SE. So if I get result, I can simply return it in the OK response. Okay, that's it. That is my get by ID endpoint. So let's check our uh, Swagger page. See, here we can see second endpoint that represent get endpoint, that is get by ID. Okay. So, and now we have to create our update endpoint as well. Okay. So let's create update endpoint. Okay. So update means put. That means our action method should be invoked for only HTTP put requests. So let's create a new action method. So I will name it like put with convention. Okay. And it should be decorated with the HTTP put. Since we have only one HTTP put action method, right? So I am not defining any route attribute explicitly. So here for updating, what I can do means db context dot which dot update. Similarly, just like add for creating, we have a method like update. Okay, to this method we have to pass our update payload. So that means our action method should contain the payload, right? So beach and update to update. So only difference here payload with the post and put is the ID value must be mandatory. Okay, for creating we don't need to require ID because ID will be newly generated. For updating, ID is mandatory because based on that ID only the update query will be generated by the context. Okay, so while updating, make sure your payload should contain the ID value. So to this method, I can simply pass my payload. So update method also changes the state of the context. So whenever the state is changed, and if you want to save the changed state into our database, whether it is an insert or update, we have to immediately call the save changes async method. Right? It should be awaited. And finally, I can simply return OK with updated data. Okay, these are our two endpoints. Let's check in Swagger our update endpoint. See, the put endpoint also we have created. Now let's go to our Vue.js application. Now let's create a new component to display the update form. Okay, so here in the beaches folder, let me add one more component like edit beach.view. Here update form and add form are mostly similar. Okay, so what I will do, I will simply copy the content from the my add beach component. Okay, to save some time. Okay, so here I can change the heading like update item. Okay, and I can change the button to update. Okay, here we have to enable the model binding anyway. So what I can do, scripts setup. Okay, and let me copy this react to variable for model binding. Okay, but it is like update, right? So change the beach to update. Okay, and change it in here as well. Okay, just I am changing the names. Okay, we have react to variable and it should contain the react to variable must be imported. Okay, so first thing is we have to populate our data, right? That means we have to invoke our get by id endpoint and we must populate the data into our form. So I have to invoke the get by id API call whenever this component or this page is rendered. That means I have to use on mounted. Okay, this is the life cycle method of our Vue.js application. Okay, so inside of this I can call Axios. So here this is a get method, right? Get by id. Where is the this one? This is the get by id value, but id must be dynamically passed. Okay, so what I can do, let me give this URL, but here it won't be a simple URL. Our ID also should be passed here, right? So how we can get ID? ID we can read from the route. We haven't configured route for this component, right? So let's configure the route first. So here, copy this and name it like edit beach, and I will give like edit with along with edit. I will have ID value as a dynamic value in the route. So that means I can specify colon ID. This means it is a dynamic placeholder here. ID is a dynamic value. Okay. Here there is no colon. That means that is static string. But here colon ID means here there will be a dynamic value. Okay. So and also on import the edit beach. Okay. So edit beach and map that edit beach here for the route. So from this we can understand our ID will be available in the URL. How it will be framed? how the ID will be populated for the edit link, we can understand in upcoming steps. But from this, what we can understand, ID will available in the route. So here I have to read the ID value from the route, right? To read the ID value from the route, let me create a variable, right? Route equal to use route. See, previously in add beach we have used use router for navigating. Here it is not use router, it is use route. So this will help to read the dynamic route values from the URL. Okay. So now this will provide route value like route dot params dot the placeholder name in the route we configured. What is the placeholder name? ID. Like this, if you access, it will give the what is the dynamic value in the URL in the ID placeholder. It will be used here. So this ID value I must find it here. So for that, what I can do instead of double quotes, I can use backticks to generate the URL dynamically and dollar and open flower brackets and pass this route. So here I am generating the URL dynamically with the ID as a input to it. Okay. So on success. So this response nothing but my single beach record will come, right? That must be added here. That data must be assigned to my beach to update variable. So here what I can do, so update dot beach name equal to response dot data dot beach name. Okay, my record. So if you have any doubt, let me show here. If I pass one of the ID value, I must get record. See, this response data, I am trying to bind it to the beach update variable. Okay. Same way I can update all the data. So response dot data dot image URL beach update dot place response dot data dot place. So here we are going to use this beach to update as a payload to our update endpoint. We haven't implemented, we will implement it. Means, and I have mentioned for updating the record ID value must exist. So that means I have to add the ID property as well. Initially, let me assign it to 0. But from the API response, we will get ID value also, right? Or I can use directly this parameter also, route param.id. Anything is fine. Okay. So beach update dot ID. Here I am going to take data dot ID. Okay, now we are done with populating the form. Let's see whether we are getting the form with the data or not. So let's add the edit button in our beach list for each item so that we can see our edit form. Okay. So here, just like add, I can add router link. Okay. But for each item, edit button will be available. So here it will be edit. So here I have to generate the dynamic value, right? So I can give colon. So if it is a normal static string, directly you can assign any dynamic string. If you want to pass to the attribute, you have to specify the colon or v-hyphen. Okay. So here you can give backticks and slash edit slash dollar item dot id. So whenever this router link renders, it will render as an anchor tag with edit slash ID value. Okay, let's check it. See here we got edit button. So if I inspect element, if you see here edit slash 10, right? And if you inspect the first one, edit slash 1 means our route is dynamically generating. So if I click on this edit button, edit form not loading, something happening. Each name. This variable name we changed, right? In HTML, I forgot to change. Okay, now let's check again and open the network calls to see the edit. Okay, click on edit and here is my get by ID call and here is the response and that data is binded to our form. Okay, now we are done with our populating the edit form. Now we have to work on the update button. So on clicking update, we have to add beach. So this is the add beach component we have copied HTML, right? So this is not the method we have here. Okay, so let me create a new method for update. So update beach. So this is my method. Okay, arrow function I am going to use. I can use axios dot. So this is put to right. We have put method, so we can use it. So same, just like our add, I can use same URL, comma payload is my beach to update variable. Okay, once I got response, I just want navigate back to my home page. So to navigate from for home page, we can use router, use router. Okay, use router. So don't confuse. Use route is to read the data from the route. Use router is for navigation. So router dot push and specify the home page. Okay. That's it. Let's test again. So click on edit button. Let me change the data something. Okay. If I click on update, okay, this method must be passed here. Now check again. So let's check again. Let's update the data and click on the update. See, data is updated successfully. That means we are successfully done with the update operation as well. Next, we are going to do our final operation, that is delete operation. Previously, we have implemented edit operation, right? So in this video, we are going to do our final delete operation. Okay, for that, we are going to create one delete endpoint and we are going to invoke it from our Vue.js application. So first, let's go to our API project and let's create the delete endpoint. Okay, so let me create an action method for my delete endpoint. Okay, and delete endpoint, I want to delete the item by ID. So ID will be in the input parameter. So it should be decorated as HTTP delete because it will be only invoked for the delete operation, delete request. So I want to read the ID value from my route. So I am going to define it in the route attribute. So route, we know how to create the ID value in route with flower brackets and with its type integer. Okay. First, we have to fetch our record from the database. Okay. So for that, what I can do, where beach to delete. Okay. And I can use find async. Simply pass the ID value. Okay. So what it will do means it will fetches the record based on the ID value. Okay. So if the item not exist, so if the user trying to delete an invalid record, then I can simply return not found result. Else, if item exists, we have to remove it from our database, right? So what we can do means my old db context dot batch dot remove. To this remove method, I have to pass my object. Okay. So here we are changing the state of the context. So we know we have to call the save changes async method. Okay. Dot save changes async. Okay, and finally I will simply return OK as a response. So this is my delete endpoint. So let's check it in our Swagger. Here you can see the delete endpoint is successfully created. Now we have to invoke this endpoint from my Vue.js application. Okay, so for that what I can do in the beach list, I can add a button here. Okay, so here I am not going to use the link because whenever user clicks on the button, nothing but the delete button, I want to show the Bootstrap model as a pop-up, like a delete confirmation pop-up. Okay, so on clicking the confirm delete on that pop-up, then only API gets invoked, item gets deleted. Okay, so for that, let me create a common component that is not page level component. So I'm going to add a new component in the components folder. Okay, like child components, those are. So let me create a component like confirm delete pop-up. Okay, so this is my component. Okay, here let's add the Bootstrap model. Okay, so for that, go to Bootstrap website, go to docs, and go for model component. Here is the model component, right? And here is the model I want to use. So let me copy this model, okay, and add it here. Let's do some changes. So because we are using this model, right? ID is one of the important thing here. So give some meaningful name like delete model, okay, or delete model and delete pop-up. We need some meaningful name. Next thing, let's define the content inside of this model, like heading like delete confirmation. Okay. And next in the body, let me add, are you sure to delete this item? Okay. This is my simple message. One is there are two buttons here, close button and save changes. Here not save changes, it is like confirm delete. Okay, confirm delete. And I want this button should display red color. Now let's add a delete button here. Button type will be button. in danger. Okay, it should be a delete button. Here I am adding the button in the beach list component. Okay, so on clicking this, the pop-up should be open. Okay, so to open, so let me write a click method here. On clicking this button, pop-up should be open, right? So let me add a method here, like open delete model. Okay, this is my method. Okay, so to communicate with the Bootstrap model, I have to get the instance of the Bootstrap. So for that, here what I will do, let's declare a variable like delete model. So to this variable, delete model instance. Okay, to this variable, I have to assign the Bootstrap model instance. Okay, so here on mounted, I can assign the Bootstrap model instance. So to use the Bootstrap model instance, here you can go for the JavaScript way of using it. Okay, so I can simply copy this. I think options will be optional. If I remove also, not a problem. Okay, and this Bootstrap will be available in the window. If you have any doubt, you can add window.bootstrap.model. Here you have to pass the ID of your Bootstrap. So I have mentioned, right, ID is have some key role here. Okay, so pass it here. So on mounting the model, we are assigning the instance of the Bootstrap model. So using this instance, I can show or hide the Bootstrap model. Okay. So this method should be registered with the click event of this button, delete button, right? So for click registration, I can use @click. And to that click, I can simply pass my open delete model. So $.event open delete model. Okay, why I am using $.event means I want to open the braces. Why I want to open the braces means I want to pass some input parameter in upcoming steps. Okay, if you don't have any input parameters, you can directly use the method name without any braces. If you want to use the braces, you have to pass like an arrow function. Okay, so let's test it whether we are able to display our Bootstrap model pop-up or not. So to display it, we have to import it into our beach list, right? This child component. So for that, here what I can do, I can import the confirm delete pop-up, and its namespace should be imported here. Okay, like this, it should be imported. Now let's check. Okay, here we are getting the delete button. If I click on delete button, see, delete confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this item? And confirm delete. But confirm delete, it is not working for now. We have to make it work. Okay. So what we can do now, the thing is we have to listen the click event from the child component, because this confirm delete model is one component, right? That is a child component of our beach list. Here we use it, right? So this is the child component and beach list will be our parent component. Now the thing is the button click inside of the child component must be listened by our parent component. Okay. So for that, what I will do, let me create one more method like confirm delete. Okay. So for now, I will just write a logic like on clicking the confirm delete, it should be hide. Model must be hide. Okay. So this method must be invoked by the click event of this button. Okay, so for that I can use emit. There is a function like emit. With that emit function, the registered event in the parent gets invoked. Okay, like a custom means for this click event here, what I will do for this click, we are going to use the emit. So to use the emit, dollar dot emit. Okay, it is a default thing. So what this emit will do means whatever the type of custom event is registered here, that event will be raised. Actually, that event is exist in the parent. So using this emit, we are raising. Okay. In that way, the button click event will be listened into our parent peach component. Okay. So here that event it's going to raise must be registered here. Okay. So I will register it like confirm delete click anything, any name you can give. So this is my custom event which will be invoked by the this button click. Okay. And to this event, I have to invoke this confirm delete method. Okay. Since I don't want to pass any input parameters, I can directly assign like this. Okay. Now this must be emitted from the child component. So copy that name and paste it here. Okay. Now let's check. Now if I click on this confirm delete, the pop-up should be hidden. It should be in single quotes. Okay. Now if I click on delete and if I click on confirm delete, see my model is hiding. Okay, so we are able to read the child component click event into our parent component. So now in this confirm delete, we have to call our API call delete endpoint. So for that, axios dot delete. Okay, and here the URL must be dynamic because our delete endpoint contains ID in the route, right? So we know how to prepare the dynamic route. So backticks class, we have to pass here ID. But how we can determine which item we have to delete? So we have to maintain it in some variable. So for that, let me create a one more ref variable like constant delete item ID. Okay. Initially, it value will be 0, initial value. Okay, I can use this value. So on model form open, at that time only I want to set the value. Okay, so delete item ID value equal to ID. Now we are maintaining the item ID that we want to delete in this variable, right? So I can use same variable here. Okay, deleted item dot value. Okay, on successful delete. After successfully delete, we have to delete from UI also because this collection of data rendering from this variable data. So we have to remove the deleted item at the server. We have to remove it from this variable also. Okay. So here we have to remove the item from each collection value also. For that, what I will do, value dot filter dot id not equal to value. Means we are filtering the deleted item from this collection so that the item gets removed immediately from the UI as well. And let's move this line of code inside of this success message. Okay, I think that's it. We are good to check the delete operation. Okay, let's go to our website. Let's open the network call and click on delete button and click on confirm delete. Not working. Value is undefined. Delete item value undefined. Why it is going undefined? Here on the open delete method, we have to pass the ID value, right? So item.id must be passed here. Okay, let's check again. Now if I click on confirm delete, see here it is deleted, and here you can see API call is successful and request is delete request. And if I reload the page also, you can observe only one item is we are receiving. That means the item is successfully deleted at the server. So that's all about the entire CRUD operation using .NET 7 Web API and Vue.js application. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this video delivered some useful content to you all. If you like my video, please do support me by subscribing to my channel as well as liking the video. Soon we are going to meet with new content. Until then,